Dr. Plotkin, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to start recording or start broadcasting soon, so everyone has a chance to come in and get ready for the session. And then we'll start right on the hour. And I've got this slide up, but then you can start whenever you're ready with the introductions. And well, the introduction of Dr. Kindberg, and then I will press play for her session.
Sure.
Great.
So I'll just start at 12.
Yeah, I'll start broadcasting right now. So once I start broadcasting, everyone will be able to hear and see everything. So I'm going to mute and hide myself. And then of course you stay unmuted and with your video on for your intro.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll start broadcasting now.
So it's 12 p.m. Time to start. I'm Anna Plotkin. I'm the president of Ontario Association of Pathologists. And hello, everybody, and welcome to Pathologist Perspective, how to successfully transition from analog to digital diagnostic as done by European Hospital Region Skåne. The first of three-part webinar series co-developed by the Ontario Association of Pathologists and Sectra, titled Shifting to Digital Pathology Functionality Beyond the Microscope. This session will be recorded and all participants have been muted. If you have a question, please type it in Q&A box only. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Certificates of attendance will be sent to all participants at the end of this webinar. I am pleased to introduce today's first speaker, Dr. Elin Kindberg. Elin Kindberg earned her master's degree and PhD at Linköping University in Sweden with a focus on immune genetics and viral diseases. After earning her PhD in 2010, she began working at Sectra, where she started as a medical advisor. After this, she had held multiple managing positions in the field of digital pathology, and for 3 years, she functions as global product manager for Sectra's digital pathology solution. She has led the journey of moving pathology from research to a commercial solution within the company and has been involved to digitalization projects in pathology in both Europe, Australia, and United States. Dr. Kindberg, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, and thank you for listening in to this session where I will talk about the lessons learned regarding things that are important for a successful digital pathology project. My name is Elin Kindberg, and I work as a global product manager for Sectra's digital pathology solution. And the things that I will talk about today comes from experience from digitization projects around the world. I've been with Sectra for over 10 years, and since 2013, I've been responsible for our pathology product. And I've been heavily involved in the projects in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. And a lot of the projects have been very successful, with labs that are today fully digital or good on their way to be fully digital. But there are also projects that have been slower than expected. And I have collected my thoughts around what are the common success factors for proper implementation based on our projects and what we've heard from the pathology sites. The things that I will talk about are not tied to Sectra as a company or to our platform, but general lessons learned of what is needed from a change management perspective, and what is important to evaluate as part of your digitization project. One of the key success factors is the buy-in from all parts of the department. There needs to be a champion in the lab as well as among the pathologists, and it is important that it's recognized that it is a big IT project to go digital, and that involvement from IT is key. These roles, together with the department managers, etc., should be involved in the evaluation of a platform for digital pathology, but also in leading the change in the way of working among their peers. Linköping University Hospital in region Östergötland in Sweden is one of the pioneers in digital pathology, and already in 2012 they scanned all over their histopathology. Like most other labs that had limited experience to scanning, they had issues with scanning quality in the beginning, and they realized that they had to adapt the preparation of slides to make it work with scanning. This affected how they cut and sectioned the slides, and as well as how they cleaned the slides before scanning. They realized quickly that to keep down the number of rescans needed and to ensure that the pathologists could use the digital images for diagnostic work and not fall back to the microscope, there were changes needed to be done in the lab. In general, this was a lot about quality of slide preparation. No dirt or air bubbles on the slide, since this will take focus during scanning. No folds of the section, since unless you scan in multiple set layers, you cannot change the focus in the image. You needed to have very thin sections. In Linköping, they chose 4 microns to ensure a good focus all over the slide. No cover slip sticking out, since this can break the scanners, and no labels covering the tissue. They also found that they had to cut smaller pieces, since the scanner don't scan all the way out to the edge of the slide, and that if you had multiple sections on the same slide, these should be put closer together, since it made scanning quicker and the files smaller. If you want to learn more about what they did in Linköping to get started, I recommend this article by Torstensson and co-workers. It describes the implementation of large-scale routine diagnostics using whole slide imaging in 2 Swedish pathology departments, first in Kalmar, where the driver to digitize was ergonomics, and then in Linköping. One of the things described in the article are steps tied to the analog and digital workflow, and what steps could be removed when moving to digital, and key aspects for successful change. And this is partly what I just described, with a tight feedback loop between pathologists and quality assurance personnel and staff in the lab to reduce level of rejected digital images. And to get the acceptance in the lab for all these changes, in Linköping, they had a very strong champion, an experienced technician who acted as the link between the different parts in the department. She was the connection between the pathologist reading the digital images and identifying issues during review, and the scanner personnel who could identify problems during scanning, and finally staff in the lab who prepared the actual sections. Digitizing the whole department is a big change, and it might be a good strategy to identify the easy wins and start there to get a momentum. I've seen labs where the initial thought was to start with only scanning parts of the histopathology production, but where they soon realized that for them it was more tedious to keep 2 separate workflows and identify what cases should be scanned, compared to simply scanning everything, even though only parts of the cases were digitally read. In other departments, we've seen that the lab scans all immunohistochemistry slides and special stains, but that H&Es are read in the microscope. Other sites have identified teaching or multidisciplinary meetings as the low-hanging fruits, and have scanned these cases after primary review is done. I believe that key is to find the areas where you see benefit and start there. This spring, it was obvious that Corona and the need to enable pathologists to work more frequently from home speeded up adoption and reading digitally. And one can assume that also those who were a bit more hesitant on moving away from the microscope got a push to make the change. So the low-hanging fruits and identifying these are important. But before moving over to digital, the department must, of course, make an investment in the technology, and this is a big decision, including very complex evaluations. This image is something that I often use as an illustration of how the real demands for a successful implementation differs from the easily discovered needs. The value of digital pathology lies far beyond the digitization of only the image. A scanner and the viewer can definitely bring value to your labs, for example, by offering the pathologist a more variable workplace compared to the microscope, and by enabling the use of image analysis. But there are also a lot of possibilities outside the digital image, and we see that it is when this is taken into consideration that the digitization project has a higher chance of success. And while the scanner of choice is of course important, it must meet your need for capacity and throughput, need for Z-stack and fluorescence. But then you must also evaluate what is needed to support the different ways of working, not just change the medium for reading images, but also bring extra value with the digital environment. This is also what, for example, Utrecht in the Netherlands realized. They were digital in the sense that they scanned all their histopathology since many years, but they lacked support for building a proper integration to their LIS, and from there build a better workflow where the strength of the digital environment could be utilized. So underneath the visible needs, we have identified a number of underlying needs for successful implementation. And I'm sure there are others that you can add to this. But the things that we've been thinking about is, for example, standardization and integration to enterprise IT systems, so surrounding systems. It's about the workflow, and I will get back to this. It's about image analysis and utilizing what is available on the market and what will come in the future. It's about accessibility. Regardless what platform you're working on, you should be able to read the images wherever you are at any time if you have the access rights. It's about scalability, possibility of starting small and then growing over time. Smart and cost-efficient archiving, since archiving of these large data amounts can hinder your actual digitization. It's about security and traceability. Who has actually been looking at the images in your servers? Stability and uptime. The system must always be up. If you have an issue with the system going down, then this will make people go back to the microscope. It's about monitoring and enabling your department to see where are the bottlenecks, where are the possibilities, and how can we work most efficiently. And finally, about accessibility to support. But as said, I'm sure there are other factors that are underlying needs that you will identify in your departments. When evaluating a platform for digital pathology, and with that I mean the IMS or PACS or VNA, it is important to think about standards and vendor neutrality. DICOM, which is the general standard in medical imaging, it is gaining momentum also in pathology, and we start to see customers using this in clinical projects. And this, I believe, is a great thing for the field, since this will increase the interoperability and decrease the time needed for all the individual vendors to spend on adapting the functions to the different scanner file formats. However, until DICOM is the de facto standard in use, it is important to still ensure that the hardware and the software that is part of your solution is open for use in a vendor-neutral setting. What we see is that many labs identify different scanners that are preferred for different use cases. One may be best for histopathology, another one for cytology, and a third for fluorescence. Also, as collaboration between labs or even acquisitions is common, it is important that the software that you use can not only support the scanners in your labs, but also in the surrounding labs. And as you grow, you will most probably want to have the opportunity to freely choose the best scanner on the market and not be dependent on the software choice you made the last time. Another key aspect of the project is changing the workflow. An important part of the implementation is to decide if you want to use a LIS or PACS-based workflow, i.e. where will your work list reside and where will you report? Among our customers, we see a mix of setups: work lists in PACS, reports in LIS, work lists and reports in LIS, or work lists and reports in PACS. The decision depends on the capability of the LIS, both in regards to the possibility to integrate and how well it supports things like workflow orchestration and structured reporting. The integrations needed can be described as two separate parts, one on desktop level, where integrations should ensure that the same patient and case is shown in your application, such as your LIS and image management system. And another part of the integration is the backend, where information must flow between your LIS and your EMR, or your EMR to your image management system to enable the work lists you want. Without the server integration, the only thing that the PACS will know about the images is what can be read from the barcodes. And this typically don't include any patient information, for example. So a minimum integration typically requires information sent to PACS to tie the case to the patient. And over time, more information such as request information, statuses, and reports can be added. With a digital workflow and with no handout of slides, the piles of glass trays will no longer act as the work list. The opportunities to optimize who reads what and within what time frames are much greater in a digital setting, but it takes integrations. The more information that can be added on a case, the better the opportunities to automatically build the best work lists in LIS or PACS. And this is a snapshot with an example of a work list, a tailored work list on individual or group levels that can be built if you have proper integrations in place. Here we have things like SLA levels or priority. And while it is important as part of a pre-study to identify the goal state for how you want to work, it is an important lessons learned from previous project that integrations is often what takes time. We often draw a picture including how a department wants to work, and then we've learned to identify what is reasonable to have in place in, say, 3 to 6 months or a year, and then later on, and then plan for a phased rollout. All this to hinder that it takes too long to even get started. An important possibility with digital pathology is image analysis, and it has been mentioned as an important driver. And while it has great potential, we don't see that the clinical use is as high as one could expect. And I believe that an important reason for this is the lack for workflow support surrounding the image analysis. This is also an area that lacks standardization, although it is being discussed in the DICOM work group, for example. What we see is that the labs where image analysis has become part of the clinical evaluation or review is where it has been integrated into the founding platform of the lab. It may not be that the provider of the image analysis solution is the same as the provider of the PACS, but we see that an integration of third-party image analysis, in-house developed or from other vendors, into the PACS increases adoption compared to if the image analysis is provided as a totally separate tool. An important advantage when working digital compared to the microscope is that an image can be reached from anywhere regardless of your physical location. The IT solution that you choose should ensure that cases can be reached from wherever you are if you have the right to reach it. The solution must hence support remote reading from, for example, PCs or tablets over secure networks if you have the correct access rights. We see that demands on patient privacy increases with the digital images compared to physical ones, since it is easier to control this with the digital logs, for example. But it's not only access rights that are important, it's also vital that the system is up and running at any time to enable you to do your job. The possibility to provide systems with close to 100% uptime is a key differentiator between software developed for clinical use and critical use cases compared to software that has initially been developed rather for research purposes. When calculating on the cost for digitizing, image storage over time is typically one of the largest, if not the largest, drivers of cost. And legislation differs between countries when it comes to for how long the digital image must be stored. But there is also a big win in having digital priors available. Hence, the field of image lifecycle management and an intelligence around what images are stored for how long and on what media is an important one to manage costs. We see that we have some customers that store everything forever digitally, while others keep a digital archive of only the last 6 months. Others want to store everything for 12 months in cases tagged for teaching, research, or as clinically highly relevant forever. Decisions around storage strategies can take time, so we see that taking these early on is important for the project to continue according to time plan. A digital workflow offers the possibility to monitor work at the department, identifying bottlenecks and optimizing your work. And this can be used both internally, but also to manage workflow balancing between pathology departments, something that you will hear more about during the next session with Dr. Kevin Sandeman. The possibility to monitor and visualize both issues that must be dealt with, but also wins in the workflow, can be used to boost the energy and motivate the use of this new way of working. So, when going digital, it is easy to focus on the digital image, and that is of course an important part of the change. But for a successful implementation and maximization of the value, one should look at the broader perspective. And I believe that this is why we often see that those who invest in the scanner and the viewer either only digitize a small part of their workflow or reinitiates the project at a later time looking for a more IT-heavy solution. And finally, I want to stress that one should not underestimate the importance of change management, of having a champion in the various positions in your department where staff will be affected of digitization, to ensure both that that they are willing to adopt the changes in a way of working, but also people who will take responsibility when obstacles occur. So this was my view of what is important to consider when going digital. But now you will also get to hear the perspective from the pathologist with Region Skåne's experience in implementing digital pathology. And the presenter is Dr. Kevin Sandeman. He's a pathologist and head of pathology department in Malmö in Region Skåne in southern Sweden. And he has been leading one of the largest pathology digitization projects in the world.
Thank you, Dr. Kindberg, for your presentation. And now we will move to our second presentation by Dr. Sandeman, who has a background as a consultant in anesthesiology and pathology. That's an unusual combo. He concentrates within his translational PhD project on the multiparametrical diagnosis of prostate cancer with a specific interest for artificial intelligence solutions for detection, grading, and subtyping of prostate cancer at the University of Helsinki. Dr. Sandeman works as a head of the Department of the Pathology in Malmö, that is a part of Department of Laboratory Medicine in region Skåne, Sweden. At the Pathology Department, multidisciplinary teamwork towards a seamless workflow and information management with help of digital pathology. Dr. Sandeman, please.
I'm Kevin Sandeman from Malmö, and I would like to thank for a great introduction and the possibility from Sectra to reflect about the things we have done and accomplished in Malmö. At first, I would like to disclose that I don't have any connections to any companies, and I just have a PhD project with the University of Helsinki. But most of all, I will talk today about digital diagnostics. And at the region Skåne, we do nowadays diagnostics without microscopic slides, and at this moment we diagnose more than 99% digitally. And we suppose or we assume that we are the biggest and largest digital pathology infrastructure in clinical practice because of the international interest for our solutions and according to the measurements made by Sectra. I will show you the outline of the slide. As first, I will go through the facts of the region Skåne. Then I will show you the things we've done for the pathologists for the transition. We have adapted the process so that it will be even easier for the lab technicians to work, and in the end I will show numbers about the effects of the transition. The region of Skåne is in the southern part of Sweden, and we have 1.4 million inhabitants in the area. My lecture will only cover histology, as we haven't digitalized the cytology yet, but it will come after several technical constraints will be solved in the future. Digital pathology project has started with all scans slides from May 2019 until now, and we have 137,000 cases and nearly 900,000 scan slides within the system at this moment. And to describe the infrastructure, we have the Division of Laboratory Medicine, and the Department of Genetics and Clinical Pathology is divided in 4 units throughout the area. Here we can see them in alphabetical order from Helsingborg to Malmö, and on the next slide I will show you that the location of Helsingborg taking care of 13% of the scan slides with one S360 scanner. It's a scanner that takes 360 normal slides, and one S60 scanner that takes macro slides. Then we have Lund producing 41% of the scan slides with 4 S360 scanners and one S60 scanner. Then in the northeastern part of Skåne, there's Kristianstad producing 11% of the slides with the same amount of scanners as Helsingborg, and then we have Malmö with 36% of the scan slides, and we have 3 S360 scanners, one S60 scanner and one immune fluorescence scanner. I will come back on that on the next slide, where we can see a summary of the 4 centers with the amount of the scanners in the inner circles. We even can see that we have 2 peripheral centers in the northern part of Skåne, and now we have 2 university centers in the southern part with Lund and Malmö. We have divided the centers according to certain subspecialties, as Lund, as an example, has soft tissue, hematopathology, and neuropathology, and Malmö has urology, breast pathology, and nephropathology, as an example. For the nephropathology and dermatopathology, we use the immune fluorescence scanners since the beginning of this year. Here we can see the transport of between the centers in the region of Skåne. We had transport in all directions before we converted to digital pathology. At this moment, we still transport some specimens to seek a release from a burden from different centers, but glass slides are seldom transported between the centers at this moment. I will continue with the technical facts about the data amount. We produce between 100 and 120 terabytes data per month. It's collected on 6 servers. And at this moment, we have 1.4 petabyte in storage. We have to keep in mind this huge amount of data, as this is a central question for cost reductions, especially as the region of Skåne scans all slides at a 400 times magnification because of the quality we demanded from the pathologist side. There's a possibility to compress this to 200 times by reducing the amount of pixels and keep a data amount is 4 times lesser, but this is a question for the management later on. Now I will show you the data flow. This is partially from 2019, this data. We know that we have approximately 7 million requests to all servers per day, with 250 requests per minute. One request is one data tile, and at the moment we have simultaneously working 100 pathologists or pathology residents at the same time. To accomplish all this, we have a cooperation with Hamamatsu for the scanners. We have the LIMS system or laboratory information management system delivered by Software Point, and we have the picture archiving and communication system delivered by Sectra. Important for all this is the integrated way, as we have the scanners that are locally placed, scanning the slides and uploading into the PACS system. On the other hand, we have the LIMS system, and they are integrated into each other so that in the end the pathologist will be able to see on the left hand side at his working station the LIMS, and on the right hand side the PACS system. We've chosen to use the LIMS system for communication with the laboratory. Customers, we use it for statistics and for follow-up, where we have chosen to use the PACS mainly for microscopy, and we use it even to compare archived slides. So I will now get into the pathologist and how their workstation looks now. At this moment, this is my workstation. So you can see on the left-hand side a 3D mouse, on the right-hand side a normal mouse, and we have the monitors with the left-hand side, the LIMS system on the right side, the microscope. We can see here that both these systems are integrated. At this moment, we have a one-way integration from LIMS to PACS at the workstation, and in the next phase, they will also be working in both directions. The LIMS system will look like this, and we still see that the clinical history from the clinician with a specimen is scanned. This was under development and should be digitalized also within 2 years. Then we see the right-hand side from the pathologist with the left upper corner showing the overview with a tracker. Central in the picture, you can see the microscope, and on the lower ribbon, you can see the overview of the slides with even upcoming immunohistochemistry slides or orders placed by the pathologist. We can change the slides just by clicking the lower ribbon and shifting through these. We even can see in the lower ribbon the amount of checked glasses and upcoming glasses. So what kind of requirements we had to accomplish this? So before the start of the project, we had we needed a positive engagement of all employees and a big technical preparation and support teams. So all the technical parts were already in early phase, and some were upgraded during the development. So all the pathologists that would be working digitally had 3D mouses, they had special monitors, upgraded graphic cards, and high-speed networks. And we also had all the scanners in place, except for the immune fluorescence scanner that came this year. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the active involvement in the development of all the applications that will be used. This was partially a reason that the pathologists were interested, as they always had some remarks about the efficiency of the system. So we had the opportunity, and we are really thankful for the opportunity to have a good collaboration with Sectra as an example, where they developed immune fluorescence viewers only months before we had our scanners in place, and they asked us also for our opinion. So I was really pleased for all these possibilities to influence the technical side of this. So, but you still have to convince pathologists within 6 months, and we did it by an individual follow-up by protocol. So all the pathologists were able, or they got during these 6 months, from the beginning of May until November, both slides and digital slides to work with. They were able to do a follow-up for the cases they weren't able to diagnose digitally, and they wrote also on top of the specimen number down the reason why they weren't able to cope with the digital slide. We took all these cases to group follow-up by discussion in multidisciplinary meetings, and here were all the involved employees and super users discussing these reasons. And this became a great internal quality check for the laboratory, as the pathologists were really concerned about the quality of the slides. And an example of the things we had to do is 4-micron slicing on all specimens. We use lesser material per cassette during embedding, and we position always central on the glasses are specimens to make sure that there will not be any problems with the scanning. When we had all these things corrected, we still had a final query for all the pathologists, and they were still concerned about mitosis calculation, the difference between different kinds of granulocytes. Some specific stainings were hard to count, and cytology wasn't good enough on scanned version. I will come back on this as we, from the management side, adapted the flow so that we could make it agreeable for the pathologist. The benefits for the pathologist were especially the ergonomics. This is on a subjective level. We don't have any scientific proof, but we can say that it was easy to adapt the working station to the pathologist's physical properties at low cost, as there are a lot of special mouses and keyboards and so on. Nowadays, the slides are always available for all the pathologists at the same time. There is no risk anymore for mixing cases at microscopy. And this immediate consultation between units and pathologists has been the greatest team building part of everything that's happening. So at this moment, we use the Sectra PAC system and Teams to communicate between pathologists and residents. And we have chat groups for all subspecialties. So you can just put in a message into the chat, and somebody from the group will almost immediately answer. The system is voluntarily functioning, and the pathologists that are just working at that moment have a possibility to react, will react. So you can usually solve a problem within half an hour easily. If it's a big problem, or it's an advanced problem, or it needs consultation on a high level, you can still use the phone call system within Teams to discuss immediately with 3 or 4 pathologists without leaving your room. We have even diagnostic support between units. We don't have to send slides anymore, and we use a system for multidisciplinary rounds on regional and national level. It has been a central part also of our training, as we can get to all our slides directly from the archive without getting the glass slides. We are able to annotate, our residents are able to annotate for a training, and we use the system for discussion. And now I will go to the part of the process that we had to change for the pathologists, so that and the lab technicians, so that we would be agreeable to work and that we would find some efficiency from the digital pathology. And here we can see that we had to change our workflow from conventional to digital, and the biggest difference between these is in the light blue boxes. After the staining, where we shifted from quality assurance to assembly and sorting by taking away the assembly and sorting and use the scanning in between. This gives the possibility to scan the glasses immediately after staining and check them microscopically by the lab technicians. This gives the lab technicians a great opportunity to learn of the cases, and we even have quality corrections by them. And as an example, I can say that when the epidermis is missing on a skin specimen, they will send it immediately back for slicing before they release the case for the pathologist. So we are winning some time from pathologists. From this point, from the scanning, all the slides will go to the archive. But we were just able to do this as some pathologists needed for their concerns about mitosis calculation and CISH and other things. We had to be able to give them the possibility to get their slides immediately back from the archive. And at this moment, we guaranteed for the pathologists they will have within 2 hours their slides from the archive, or they will be able to get a new scanning of these glasses when they're out of focus, and they can order it through the LIMS system without any special efforts. This means for the lab technician that we can see that they work nowadays digitally. They save time from assembly and sorting. Nowadays there's just one person working, where we had before 2 persons. They can check their own work and quality, and they correct these quality issues, as I mentioned before. And then I would like to take on the effects, and I will have to say that from a management position, we will focus on the pre-pathologist phase, as we had a lot of specimens before that were waiting on diagnostics by pathologists when they were already finished at the laboratory. And then we have, from a management perspective, also an interest on how long the specimens are at the pathologist before they answer. So if they're hard cases, or pathologist is undecisive about a case, we wanted to know about these cases, and we wanted to be able to influence this. Here we see the overview of undiagnosed cases in a pre-pathological phase, waiting on pathologists to take these cases on. We see on the right-hand side the date I took out the data, so it's the 3rd of August, and then we see for every day the total amount of cases for every center. We as head of departments talk about this amount of cases, and we redirect cases to different centers according to the burden, local burden for these places. Lund has a high peak that's about a week old, but has to do with some delays at the laboratory. But we also know that there are a lot of pathologists in Lund, as it's the biggest center in the area, so they can cope with it easily. Helsingborg, on the other side, has high volume here with more than 100 cases waiting on diagnosis, and they will get relief by help from other centers not having as many cases. So we use it to redirect the cases to areas with resources for diagnostics. And here I will show the overview of the cooperation. These are the results of the answered pathology cases and specimens, and we see the cytology. That's not important now. We have the other histology, and then we have two staples or columns with general pathology from the own location and from other locations. General means here GI, gynecology, and dermatopathology. And we see that we have about 1,000 cases being diagnosed at other centers than where they primarily came into due to this collaboration. We can even see for the individual pathologists how much they go and take at the other centers and support their other centers. It depends on the subspecialties they have and their capacity to diagnose. I would like to emphasize that this is July 2020, and it's a holiday period in Sweden, so we see quite a lot of specialists answering their cases, but also at low volume, and that's because of the holidays, that they are not at work during a period of this month. We compare our centers also between received and reported cases per week. We use it to have an overview, and in the end we can even make a summary of everything and a balance. On the right side we can see the balance of all the cases within the region, and at this moment we're at balance. The 907 cases over capacity was mainly due to COVID that called all the researchers back to the pathology department in Lund, and they were able to support the whole area in an extraordinary way. This is the total amount of cases in age as weeks. So on the right hand side is last week, and moving to the left we will have older and older cases at the desk of the pathologist. And we see in the dark green color the results made in April. And we see that we had even a few cases older than 8 weeks. We see from management perspective that these are unacceptable cases. But then we see a progress and an improvement when we do the same measurement in June. And we see also the mean answering time shifting to the right. So nowadays we have a mean or median answering time about 2.5 weeks, and before we had it around 4 weeks. In this slide I will show you the same results, but only for Malmö and compared to last year, as we have a total amount of cases within our laboratory, and this is for all the cases, even without processing before the pathologist. And the most important part are the lower lines that say that cases are older than 3 and 4 weeks, as these are the parts that we are sure that they are due to the pathologist. and their answering times. And now we can see that they totally disappeared. On this slide, we can see the effect on overtime in the region of Skåne. On the left-hand side, we can see numbers 0.2. This is approximately 1.5 FTE of a pathologist. And every column is representing a month from January 2017 until now. And we can even see that we have peaks where we need approximately 9 full-time equivalents of a pathologist extra to cope with the burden. And we see the start of pathology where we can see a clear decline of the use of these overtime, and even less when all units went digital. These high peaks are especially during holiday periods in Sweden, and now we're in a holiday, the summer holiday, and we see that we didn't have as much overtime as before, so it has been a success that way. Of course, everybody wants to know the effects of the COVID-19 epidemic. And we can say that we have seen a decline of about 7.1% in the amount of cases in the whole region. So it doesn't explain the effect of the reduction of our answering times. Indirectly saying that we have adapted our way to a digital working way and improved our answering times that way. Then last but not least, we still have a lot of questions for the management. What will we do with the glass slides? We still have an archive for them. And at a point we will have to decide what we will do with them. What kind of data format is quite important. At this moment we use the NDPI. We are discussing the DICOM alternative, as we then will have an opportunity to compress the pictures and the data amount by 4 times. This is the same question, how to reduce the data amount is the same question. Maybe we have to prioritize certain cases and keep the highest resolution. All these discussions are going on, and then in the end we're even thinking even further on how to implement seamless consultation over regional borders. Will it be possible, as the region of Skåne is still an independent area compared to the rest of Sweden, where they have their own solutions. I would like to thank everybody for their interest in this talk, and I hope there was something to learn. I'm Kevin Sandeman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandeman. We'll now take time to answer questions. So if I can ask our speakers to please unmute themselves and let us see their faces. Excellent. Thank you again very much. My name is Meredith, and I am the conference manager for the Ontario Association of Pathologists. Thank you again for joining us. So I will start with some of the first questions. So just from the bottom to the top, Dr. Sandeman, what is the most important advice for us wanting to begin a digital transformation, and how should we consider funding?
How should we consider?
Funding.
Oh, yeah, I think the funding is really important. In the region of Skåne, we had like a political decision that supported this. So it was, we can say that the clinical management of the hospital was convinced that the digital project will help them, because they were one of the first managements to introduce the digital radiology. So they convinced politicians to support the funding. So we had like, well, it's not unlimited, but it was it's at this moment it was not about profit, it was about development. So that's important. So the financial part was taken care of in political means. For me, so when the biggest challenge for us was to implement it and to make it slide free, and there's the most important part is to change the mindset of pathologists, because it's a specialty with a long tradition, and to convince people that it's as scientifically safe as the microscope is from the beginning quite hard. So you will have, we had to introduce everybody, we had to have a lot of contact with everybody and really react fast when they had like technical problems, not even concerning the microscopes, but when their computers were broke, when programs were not working, we had to really react fast, because it was a process of being careful with people and their feelings.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, please feel free to input your questions in the question and answer box so we don't miss any of your feedback. Next question, what future trends do you predict for digital pathology, and how is AI transforming digital pathology?
Well, one part I don't have to predict. I think that all centers can work digitally. So I'm convinced that all centers can shift toward a digital workflow. So that's a part of the prediction, that everybody is able to go over, but there will have to be some feedback systems that will allow pathologists to accept this. And one part at our center was that they will have their glasses slides within 2 hours, and we can even deliver them fast or scan them again, so there won't be any delay on that part. So that was really important to make the flow work so that they will accept it. The other part is always with these questions, there's the AI question. I think we're at this center, we're quite near a point of taking AI into consideration. There are some solutions already into the programs, but the most important part is that pathologists will have to learn what AI provides, and it's AI will, well, in a comparison, we can say that AI will start to work as a stethoscope. The stethoscope wasn't validated. You had to learn to work with it and to accept its benefits and hinder also. So it's really important to introduce AI on a basic level so that everybody will be able to work with it, because small technical problems can get pathologists and other people to reject a technique that has a lot of benefits, but it's not perfect.
Thank you. What was the biggest challenge in implementing digital pathology, and how did you overcome it? Cross over there.
The biggest challenge to overcome it was the mindset. So I cannot say that any one of our pathologists was from day one prepared to leave the slides. So they worked simultaneously, and they had quite a lot of time to still work with the slides. So we haven't taken up the question of making our center slideless until we knew that almost, or even 90% of pathologists were already convinced that they would be able to convert. So they got time to adapt in their own way, and during this period they registered all their problems, and a lot of these problems led to internal quality corrections, and that was the biggest part, that they had an influence on the process. They were able to change their mindset without being forced immediately to it. So it was again the engagement of all the pathologists and the possibility to interact. If we didn't force anybody to interact, if they weren't interested in a meeting, they weren't forced to come. But always I can say at the meetings that we had really enthusiastic pathologists and really the pessimistic part of the pathologists also. So they met each other at these meetings and they could convince each other of going onward and accept it. So it's the mindset, it's the hardest part to convince people to go further.
Thank you. Dr. Hafezi Bakhtiari just says, thank you for sharing your experience, and she's wondering how long the digital images as well as the glass slides are kept and stored.
So at this moment, there's still the discussion. So the highest management haven't decided. So they're quite dependent on our choice also. But as I said, we have still some discussion ongoing, that is at what kind of quality will we save the slides for the future. There's some legislations. The times we're talking about are for sharing, storing the pictures or the images in the archives is between 7 and 10 years. We are now discussing about this. I still don't know what kind of decision will follow, but it's up to the highest management. Between 7 and 10 years, we will recommend.
What is the validation process for digital primary sign-out?
Yeah, well, I think the validation process is really like a part of like, it's quite often on a national level, this determined. So different systems and different pathology associations will recommend other things. At our center, we have chosen just to report the problems through protocol. So we dealt with all the problems when we were checking the slides. So we didn't use like a 2-week washout period before we started again. So we dealt with all the problems they had. And if a pathologist wasn't able or would have missed a diagnosis digitally, they had the possibility to check the diagnosis with a microscope during these 6 months. At this moment, we still check diagnostics at a subspecialty level at the multidisciplinary rounds, but we don't do any validations anymore in the scientific way, as you can say, well, with the washout time and check the diagnostics, as we don't see any clear effects of it. So if we look at the studies done in Linköping, when they have checked like 2,000 cases, they changed like in 2 or 3 cases the grading of a tumor, but there wasn't a clinically there wasn't a big difference. So we have chosen for a practical approach.
Thank you. Dr. Wolfson asks, how long does it take the pathologist to look at a digital image compared to the same in a microscope/glass slide? Does digital pathology slow it down the process?
Oh, in contrary, it's my experience, and is the experience of everybody here. As we don't do any identification checks or identity checks anymore. So at this moment, we switch the glasses really fast. As head of department, I'm quite often disturbed by colleagues and co-workers coming into my office. And I always mark what I do on my glasses, so I can always come back to a case in the middle of it and just continue. And I have always my notes into the slides registered. So I would say you don't have to check any identity mix-ups when you sign out them after dictating or anything. You can fast see, you can quick check the slides again if you're worried that it wasn't correctly. So the cases come really fast back and forth, and there's no risk of mixing up them. It's a nice way of working, and it's as I say, my co-workers, nobody would consider to leave this place before the other places have gone digitally.
Great. Dr. Piskorsky asks, how are the images opened? Can you click on a case in your work list and the corresponding image opens? Or do you have to run 2 programs and open the case in the LIS and image viewer separately?
That's quite interesting, because everything is, well, within IT, everything is under a continuous development. And as we've chosen for different partners within this development, we choose also the properties within their systems that are the best functioning at the moment. So at this moment, we have chosen for the list system to be guiding us throughout the process. So we have our working lists within the list system. We can open our cases there. The list system can even offer us archive the diagnosis in a long list, and we can activate all the cases with a kind of this typical, well, with this diagnosis at once, and we just can flip through them really fast. So the list system at this moment is like the guiding system. But there's even in the viewer, we have like 2 windows, and one of the windows in the viewer also offers working lists. But at this moment, there will be some discussions about development on using this. It depends all on the level of integration of the system and what kind of possibilities, especially for us as from the management side, we want to enable the co-workers and pathologists to work as unhindered as possible, and that's why we choose the system that enables the best user-friendly methods. So we at this moment we work with Liz, but there's even at the Sectra part a development that is really interesting us. So it's open. We can work in both, but at this moment Liz is better adapted for our needs.
Thank you. With digitization and no longer need for microscopes or even have to work in the hospital, is the hospital going to save money somehow by reducing office space, etc.?
At this moment, so we are a university center. At this, we are like a big. We have 4 centers, and we have nearly 40 residents in training. And we see as a part of the process that all pathologists are in place and are working here, as we see that our equipment, that the employers are responsible for the equipment used. So we use the 4K monitors and so on. So we cannot guarantee this kind of quality at home, and we don't have any legislation controlling these things at home. But what I can say is that we have some co-workers that have laptops with the VPN into the hospital system, and they can open them. They use docking systems at home, and they have 4K monitors, and they do some diagnostics from home. But we don't have a goal on reducing working place space for pathologists. Our goal is still that everybody will have his own diagnostic room and will be able to work in peace. But as all professional relations demand also that when we have grossing or other things and a colleague gets ill or sick or during the day, another colleague will have to be in place. So if people start working from home, they will have to be quite close to the hospital.
Thank you. An offshoot, did you have a business case showing this somehow would reduce the costs in the long run?
I think from the beginning at this moment, as with all these kind of startups, projects, and I think these projects are quite often more expensive than they will be in the future. So at this moment, the technology is new, the experiences are new, we find problems we wouldn't expect, but I think within the near future, all the hazards will be tackled, and I think then maybe it's easier to make it like interesting for cost effectiveness. At this moment, I don't think we're cost effectively working yet.
Okay, Dr. Snowden asks, are you signing out cytology with scan slides?
At this moment, we don't have a cytology flow for the normal practical flow. We use the scan slides to consult between centers, but even then, some of the cytologists at the Lund Center, so it's like the headquarters for cytology, want the slides. We do scan the slides for the multidisciplinary rounds and so on. So the quality is good enough for clear cases, but well, it's not. I'm not a cytologist in that means, so I cannot really decide if it's able. Most constraining for us is the size of the cytology glasses in bytes. That was, and then so also the scanning time. As you use Z stacking, it means that we will have like 5 slides made out of one. So you scan in different levels, and it's a lot of data, and it takes a lot of time, and the quality, we are not there quite yet at this moment. So.
Great. The question here is Sweden a publicly funded healthcare system? And if so, how did you convince the government to support digitization?
The highest management within our like laboratory medicine was, he was also responsible for digitizing radiology within the region during the 90s. And this project was once before attempted in 2012, and all the infrastructure was in place, but the technology wasn't ready. And as said, Sweden only has a publicly funded, or like it's the biggest part of the healthcare is publicly funded. So this manager went once more back to the politicians and asked once more for a budget to start this. And I think the technology was, last year, the technology was really, it was ready for implementation, and we succeeded. So it's publicly funded, and we had a manager that was convinced about the benefits of digitization within pathology. And I think he succeeded with this project. He's really proud of it, as we work so well together around the cases.
How do you handle frozen sections from the operating rooms and surgeons?
So frozen sections at this moment, so as we are all in place and all the pathologists are in place, frozen sections come into the system. We diagnose them microscopically, as the scanners don't allow gluey slides. They will have to be I think it's possible, but we don't take the risk with the scanners. So we diagnose them microscopically, and then we scan them after they're dried. And then we use the scanned slides from the frozen sections for comparison to H&E afterwards. So we have them scanned afterwards. But I'm convinced that it's also possible for distance, for diagnostics at a distance.
Okay. How did the adoption of digital path affect staffing in the histology lab? Did it require more histotechnologists or hours of work? And what was the feedback from histotechnologists?
So it's like the amount of IT persons we needed to come.
Yeah, I think the question is about the staffing and how it may have affected the staffing.
Okay, so the staffing at this moment, so the staffing for the IT part is that we have so in Malmö we have one IT person in place, and he helps us with all these things like webcams, all the small things, all programs that don't function. He comes into our rooms and checks it. They also have a responsibility in helping us with installations and other problems. So it's really important that we have them in place. And then we have in Lund 2 persons doing this. So in the region we have 3 persons helping just with like small corrections of keyboards, and they even help us with the microscopic viewers and so on. But we demanded afterwards more 2 more persons. Before we had like 2, and at this moment we're working with 3 to answer the demand of the pathologist and make the system stable. They also found like problems within the networks, like some of the centers, Helsingborg and Kristianstad in the peripheral part of Skåne. They needed a lot of help with their networks, that they were fast enough so they could work digitally.
I Excellent. We're coming to the end of our Q&A time. I want to thank everyone for, perhaps we've got time for this last question. Did you give pathologists a choice to remain slide-based? If so, did any remain slide-based?
There's no choice of being slide-based, as we needed to relieve the laboratory technicians of the picking, the assembly. So we need, and that's why the archive takes care. If you want all the slides to your room, you can order them. So everybody, we don't force anybody to digital diagnostics. But they can always order all the glasses to their room, but they cannot get them straight from the system anymore. They will have to get them from the archive. So within 2 hours, they can have all the slides if they want to be stubborn.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to move away from our accredited portion of this session and invite Dr. Kindberg to answer any questions from Sectra. I do have one off the bat, Dr. Kindberg. What is the most important feature or features to analyze when considering multiple digital pathology solutions?
Well, I think key is to identify what your need is or what your vision is with going digital, because we often see that the requirement is that you will become more efficient, or you want to work more in a collaborative manner between laboratories, for example. And then it is important to identify, well, what do you need to implement to reach that vision? In general, I think that evaluating the IT capacity and the possibility to integrate, to perform, to support your different workflows is key. So to identify what are the capabilities that you need and how well are these supported by the system that you evaluate. And then I really think that vendor neutrality is something to focus on, to ensure that whatever you go for, it's an open system and that you're not locked down into like a black box solution that is connecting only a specific hardware and software.
Thank you very much. If anyone else has questions for Dr. Kindberg in particular, please feel free to answer in the question and answer. Dr. Kindberg, did you have anything you would like to add at this point?
I can just comment on the frozen section question that was asked before. That we do have sites such as Linköping that are scanning their frozen sections, and that they are made available to the pathologists digitally, but that as a pathologist you can choose if you want to read the physical slide in the microscope or if you want to read the digital one. I know there are issues with the scanners that don't, or that may
We may have lost Dr. Kindberg. Are you still with us, Dr. Kindberg? I'm so sorry, it seems that we've lost Dr. Kindberg. I will absolutely ensure that any of these follow-up questions for her be sent on, and we will be in touch with all of the attendees with any of the frequently asked questions here. Dr. Sandeman, did you have anything to add at this point?
No, I don't have anything to add. I'm really pleased that I was able to reflect again, and I always appreciate the questions that come because they will prepare my future answers also. So I'm really pleased to be able to reflect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeman. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, I'm sure Dr. Sandeman or Dr. Kindberg would not mind us passing them on following this, or for those that are engaging in the recording right now, all you simply need to do is email the OAP and we'll be happy to pass on that feedback. At this time, I would just like to thank everyone very much for their ongoing support of the Ontario Association of Pathologists by giving of your time today. I would also like to note that this webinar was co-developed with Sectra and OAP and was planned to achieve scientific integrity, objectivity, and balance. Thank you, Sectra, for your support. I encourage all the attendees to participate in the short evaluation that will follow this session. Your feedback is integral to planning new sessions and for feedback for those participating in this session today. And as you may know, the OAP virtual annual meeting, the inaugural virtual annual meeting, will continue for the next 3 days. We are excited for the program to come and hope that you can all join us. Please visit ontariopathologists.org to see program details and register. It's not too late. And lastly, this session today that you're engaging in happens to be a 3-part session. The second of the sessions will take place on Wednesday, September 30th. And again, you can find registration information at ontariopathologists.org. We look forward to a great session with Dr. Kindberg again, and also with Dr. Max Folding. I see Dr. Plotkin is here. Would you like to close with any words?
Yes, on behalf of Ontario Association of Pathologists, I really want to thank everybody who joined this excellent webinar, and thank you to our company, E&M, Meredith and Heather, for supporting and inviting those great speakers. Good day, everybody. Bye.